Thank you for staying with us. This is the big story. We're talking about the teacher shortage in the country. So let's get into some of those numbers now. Well, but first, Garang_11 says, let's hope with such demands, standards of teaching will improve. And then I will get to, D. Nyakundi 2 says, lack of teachers since when? I'm a graduate with 3 years of experience, but TSC hasn't found it in order to employ me. Okay, so it clearly isn't a lack of teachers in the country, but rather a shortage of teachers in employment in the country. So take a look at those numbers there. There's the shortage in primary schools is 40,972, and that's what even our viewers are referring to here on social media. And in regular post-primary institutions, the shortage is of 63,000. That means there's 63,849 teachers that are needed. If you take a look at post-primary, if you're to ensure that there's 100% transition, that is 50,789 teachers are needed, bringing the total deficit to 155,000, a little over 155,000 with respect to that. So the pupil to teacher ratio, it is highest in these counties. That's Turkana, Mandera, Wajir, Bungoma, and West Pokot. But it is also highest in Migori, Turkana, West Pokot, Kilifi, and Bomet. But it is actually, I believe it would be lowest, yes. So that's what it's looking like in the country at the moment. Those are the numbers that we are speaking of with respect to that. So my guest tonight, Sheila Maunga, and she's the Secretary General of the Association of Kenyans in the Diaspora. She's worked both here and she currently works in the United Kingdom. So we are pleasured to have you here with us. Andiwa Obondo, who's an education policy and governance expert. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you for your time on the show tonight. Sheila, I'd like to begin with you. Just for comparison's sake, you're a trained teacher here. You're also working in the UK. How do our ratios and our standards compare with the UK and perhaps other countries that you have been following?
I would say that the comparison, especially just hearing what Mr. Sosion says, is quite alarming. Kenya isn't doing well at all. One problem that is there when we have teacher shortage is that the people that pay for it are the children. It is our students, our pupils, that are paying for this shortage. So as much as Mr. Sosion spoke about the teacher burnout, and he spoke about the teachers being overstretched and many of them losing the morale, the people that end up paying for this are our children, who are the future of this country. So this is a very big problem that I think it should not be the problem of the union alone to deal with. It should be a problem that every Kenyan that has a child and every Kenyan that is invested in the future of this country should stand up and speak about it. So this is a problem for all of us. We are all people that are interested in this country because it's our country. And if anything is wrong with education, that means we're heading down a scary slide. In terms of comparison, what I would say is the whole of this thing, you wonder, how come money is not being given to invest in education? How come we are focusing on other things, as Mr. Sosion said here? And I think it comes down to how we value our teachers. I feel that this is a problem that has been there for a long time. Teaching as a field is something that has not been, it's not rated highly. It's not seen as something like engineering or law or there are other degree courses that are seen as something great, while teaching is seen as something that is just a by the way. So for that reason, that value, we don't value our teachers as much here in Kenya. I say this as a comparison because in the UK, teaching is seen as a very noble profession. It's a prestigious thing. When you say you're a teacher, you say it with pride. Whereas in Kenya, when you say you're a teacher, you say it apologetically, kind of, you're a bit sorry to be a teacher, kind of a little bit of embarrassment around it. And that lack of value, when we don't value our teachers that much, that is when we do not allocate budget for them. That is when they finish their degree courses, we don't give them jobs, we let them stay out there. It's because we don't value them. And I would say other countries, they value their teachers. So that's one thing that's different. Another thing that also stands out is the teacher-to-student ratio. In Kenya, I am sad to say that a teacher can go to a class of up to 60 or 70 students, and that is normal. And free education, I believe Mr. Sosion touched on it, is to blame somehow. We brought in free education, which was a brilliant concept, but we didn't think through it. We didn't increase the resources that were there, both human and physical resources. So we ended up overstretching what was already there. And now we're having classes that are overcrowded. We're having classes that now happen in shifts. I'm aware of schools. I'm very much invested in the education here in Kenya. So I'm aware of schools whereby, primary schools whereby we have children learning in shifts. So that those that come in the morning up to midday, they go home. Then we have others that start from midday onwards till the afternoon because they just don't have enough desks. They don't have enough books because of the free education. Now, what this means is that the quality of education is going down because before the free education, the children are going to school the whole day. Now they're going half the day. Okay. And the teacher is really overstretched doing this. All right. And as I say, our children pay for it.
Okay, Sheila. So you've talked a little bit about resources, which is an important one to talk about as well. But I also just want to let you know about some of the counties with the lowest pupil-to-teacher ratios. Mm-hmm. And you would be surprised at some of these counties: Baringo, Tharaka Nithi, Nyeri, Embu, and Lamu. Also, Samburu, Marsabit, Isiolo. But interestingly, Nairobi as well falls in that. So this is something interesting to start to talk about and interrogate further. But there's that issue that Sheila has brought up, Andiwo, about not just the number of teachers per se, but the resources that are available. Is that something else that we have, overlooked? Is resource, and not just money, I don't know, but maybe desks, classrooms, is that also a factor to consider?
I would say that's a factor to consider. Yes, resources. I see, you see all these projects they put in Kenya, like the SGR, for example, or the roads, or there's so many things that you see money is going towards them, but no money is going towards education. Now, for me, I feel that education is the background of everything in the country. It's the foundation of the country. It is, you see, education, the main importance of education is the socialization, the norms, the values, and the skills of a nation uses education as a vehicle to forward them through. So even if we want to build the biggest railway station in the world, or the biggest hospitals, or the most wonderful roads out there, without educating our people to build these things, to have the skills to do it, we're heading nowhere.
Okay, all right. Andiwo, what do you think about the other resources that teachers may require?
Thank you, Yvonne. I think before I comment on the question you just raised, let me correct the impression that Sheila is creating, that the problem is with free education. The free education is not a problem. The problem is our prioritization. Remember, before we talk about quality and teacher issues, we must be able to create opportunities for all Kenyan children to access education. So I don't think the problem is with the FPE. But coming to your question, Yvonne, I agree totally that the problem is how we prioritize our national issues. If you look at what TSC has been doing over the years, I think over the past 10 or so years, they've been employing around 5,000 teachers every year. If you look at that gap, 5,000 against over 100,000, it is like a drop in the ocean. What you would have expected is that even the current government, as it has happened before, would have given education more priority, so that we don't blame TSC for the role of parliament or the role of the treasury. I remember hearing Mrs. Macharia today saying that they need 20,000 teachers, 20 billion, I mean, to be able to recruit adequate number of teachers per year. But Parliament allocated them last year, around 5 billion. What I think we need to do is to have a candid discussion as a country and agree that Treasury and Parliament must prioritize. Now that we are getting into a new budget cycle, I would expect that the Parliamentary Committee on Education should be able to insist on either 20 billion or even more, because we need an average, or a minimum of 20,000 teachers to be able to address that gap in 5 or so years.
Yeah, okay. My question was also with respect to some of the tools and the resources that teachers would require, because let's imagine an ideal situation in which, that gap, the teacher shortage, is significantly reduced. But isn't it also true, Andiwo, that basic facilities like classrooms, for example, are missing? I mean, we see these pictures all the time from remote parts of the country where people are learning outside under trees. But just talk to us about these resources that teachers themselves require to be effective in the classroom.
Yeah, you are right that teachers alone will not address the issue of quality in education. We need to be able to provide conducive environment for these teachers to be able to deliver the curriculum. One thing that we must have is we must be able to have adequate and conducive classrooms, learner-friendly classrooms. And I think it is a shame that 60 years, close to 60 years after independence, we're still talking about children learning under trees and some learning in very depleted classrooms. What we need to focus on is looking at the resources that we have. We have national government resources, both in terms of the national treasury allocation to ministry, and we also have other infrastructure funds that are coming through CDF, and we also have possibility that counties could invest in developing infrastructure. So infrastructure is very important. I mentioned classroom. The other thing that we need to also to see is textbooks. I think the idea of taking textbooks to the schools may be a good idea, but it is wrongly being implemented.
How
For
so?
instance, if you look at teachers are not being given opportunity to get involved in selecting what materials they need and even the quality of those materials. The other thing that we need to look at is libraries where we can be able to stock those books. We also need to look at laboratories where for schools that or classes that require them, both primary and secondary. And also teachers need other aids, teaching aids. So I think we need to look at the whole education sector needs and focus on what do I need as a teacher to deliver quality education to the learner.
Yeah. What, Sheila, do you think should be the priorities when you take a look at what happens in the United Kingdom where you work and the situation that pertains here? Where should our priorities be?
I think the priority that should be, we should value education. We should look at education as something that's really important in the development of the nation. I think we need to educate our leaders because a lot of this is, a lot of the budget allocation and a lot of these problems, it requires someone somewhere to sign a bill or to sign something that authorizes a lot of things. So I believe that we need to educate our leaders on the importance of education. I think we need to go back there and tell them that, you know what, when we are not training, when we're not teaching our children well, and if we have teachers if we don't have teachers, definitely our children are not getting a good education. So we need to train our leaders first and foremost and tell them, you know, if education is compromised, then we're heading nowhere as a country. This is something that has severe repercussions in the whole country. Then the other thing that we also need is to train the people, the masses. We need to have civic education on the importance of education because there's some complacency around it. We have schools that have got no teachers, or we have schools that have got very few teachers. We have schools that are overcrowded, but the parents and the society at large, they're just comfortable with it. They're waiting for someone else to, you know, take up arms and talk about it, or they're waiting for divine intervention of sorts. So we also need to educate our people, you know, to ask questions and to demand for services.
All right, ask questions, demand for services. I'd like us to shift the conversation just a little bit from just the numbers, but then also how some of those are treated in terms of promotion. But then also, I'd like us to hear from Ambassador Amina Mohammed, who's the Cabinet Secretary. We'll hear from her first, from her a little later. But first, let's listen to Omboko Milemba, who's also a member of the Parliamentary Departmental Committee on Education. He was talking about ethnic promotions.
In different regions are done based on the ethnic group. So if you are the person of that particular place, you are unlikely to be promoted. And somebody from outside, chair, I'm addressing you, is promoted. If you don't get nib of that trend, which is currently going on within the system countrywide, then we shall have a situation whereby, chair, we shall have an upheaval.
So this is talking about, you know, the welfare of teachers. And it's not just about promotions and what's happening in the whole delocalization issue that Sosion had talked about. There is also the security of teachers, and we have seen this for the last few months, maybe even a year, where teachers are saying in certain counties their security is not guaranteed. Here's what CS Amina had to say.
Ongoing of recruiting teachers for Wajir. We agreed that we would actually get curriculum assistance, 1,200, if I recall the number, and that the ministry would actually pay for them for the next 2 months so that we can just bridge, you know, the gap that exists currently. But obviously, since there's an advertisement that went out, And what my understanding is that, in fact, more teachers than those that are needed have applied. And so the TSC will obviously go through that process. The advice that we've given is that for the teachers that are going to Wajir, since the hardship period to stay in a hardship area is 3 years, that those teachers should be requested to stay there.
Andy, I'd like you to comment on the welfare of the teachers who are currently in service.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. I think security is very key to all Kenyans. And I think security of teachers where they work should be paramount. And if the government cannot be able to guarantee teacher security wherever they are, whether in the northeastern region of Kenya or any other region, then I think we cannot be able to ask teachers to stay where they are feeling insecure. So when we talk about welfare, to me, security comes first. And then we look at where do they live? Do they have housing, either in the schools or within the localities where they can be able to reside and go to school? How do they get other amenities, like if they need health services for themselves and families? I've had teachers complain in the recent past about the kind of insurance scheme that they have through TSC. So I think that these are some of the things that we need to look at. We need to focus on security, look at the health of the teachers, and also look at housing and other factors that they value.
Andy, I want to ask what you think the solution would be towards getting teachers in counties like Wajir, in Garissa, because there's a number of teachers who are saying, we don't want to go there, we don't feel secure. But then there is the real crisis that there are just not enough perhaps locals to be employed as teachers, and that's why even the cabinet secretary was talking about teaching assistants. So where's the middle ground? You know, what do we do? Because certainly the children in these counties in the northern part of Kenya need a quality education.
I think teaching assistant is one of the options that we can be able to consider to sort out this issue, but also we can be able to, I think it is possible that if we tighten security first in some of these areas, then teachers from outside these counties can be able to stay there. But what again we can do maybe for a sustainable solution would be if we can be able to get qualified residents of these counties. We can recruit them as teaching assistants and then give them training, on-the-job training, so that at least in the event that it is not possible for teachers from outside the region to stay there, then these teachers in a year or so should actually be able to be trained as they work. And then we should be able to get the learning going on in the region.
Okay, Sheila, I'd like a final comment on just some lessons that we can learn from our counterparts elsewhere.
I think one lesson we can learn, I'll just comment on what the ambassador said about teaching assistants. I noted that she said there would be 1,200 of them and they will be there for 2 months. So one of my questions is, what happens after 2 months? The other comment I'd like to make is about the teaching assistants themselves. Teaching assistant, in many developed countries like the UK, the teaching assistant works hand in hand with the teacher. It's like a doctor working hand in hand with a nurse. So the doctor gives the instructions to the nurse on what to do. You cannot now say, because the doctor doesn't want to work, let the nurse take over. So I believe that as a remedy falls short. These teaching assistants, not only are they not able to give the quality of standard of education as a teacher would, they're also going to face the same security risks as they are there in those places. So do we say that, oh, teachers shouldn't face security, but teaching assistants should? So my closing shots, lessons we need to learn, we need to give proper solutions to problems. We should not just put something like a elastoplast of a bleeding wound and expect that the bleeding will stop. We need to get proper solutions. And one solution we need to have is we need to value our teachers. We need to make sure that we are paying them the correct amount of salary that befits their role in the society, which is very important. They are bringing up the future generation of our people. We should also value their welfare, not only just the salaries, their welfare, like the security we're talking about, the needs, like how many of them, like the overstretching of classes, this is not valuing them at all. So the main thing we need to do is just value our teachers and give them, that respect that they need and know that they're very important to us. Yeah. And the other thing, we need to take politics out of education. I say this as a note that the Secretary General and the Chairman of the Union of Teachers, they are politicians as well. And we find that a lot of also decisions that are made out there, there's politics. There's a lot of politics in education. We should take politics out of education. And when we take politics out of education, we should also have monitoring systems that keeps in check the organization or the departments that are in charge of education, like the TSC. The TSC needs to have something checking it to see, are they doing everything that's in order? Like they mentioned about promotion based on tribalism. We need to have checks in place for these things. We just need to stop being complacent or stop waiting for someone else to do the action. It is us that need to do it. This is all our problem because education affects us all.
Indeed. Sheila Maunga, thank you very much. Andiwo Obondo, I thank you as well. Thank you to you, my viewers. Let me take a look at your feedback. Marutit Alvin says, I'm a trained high school teacher and no job. I graduated 3 years ago. Please tell my sister from the UK to link me up. I will go and deliver. So just talking about that. Waswa Rogers says, teachers are the most underrated employees in Kenya. They are the ones that teach all the others how to tackle their careers. Their grievances must be heard and implemented. Smart operator is what you call yourself on Twitter. You say inadequate teachers is not enough to explain the drop in the performance curve. The CEO needs to explain further. Sitati Wasilva says the problem is prioritization. Why procure laptops and tablets when there's a massive shortage of teachers, inadequate and dilapidated classrooms, poor sanitation, etc. So Alan Makodembo says, if the TSC CEO is loudly crying, how loud will I cry? Sad. We have thousands of unemployed teachers, yet the government itself is crying. Eric Noah says, I have on several occasions offered myself for employment as a teacher of English literature anywhere in the Republic, including the Northern Frontier. Any offer? So that and much more. Can I read one more? Yes. Adam Shea, you say promotion for diploma teachers to job group L was stopped by TSC since October last year. Please ask him, I believe you're referring to Sosion, if he is aware about it and what he is doing. There is much more of that feedback you can track. The hashtag is the big story. That's our show tonight.